Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday. You will see Momo has joined us from yesterday. I'm wearing the same shirt. I have not slept in my clothes. I am pre-recording this video as I'm going to pre-record tomorrow's video. But I gotta apologize for the Swiffer Sweeper vac that was in the back of my shot yesterday. I saw that afterwards. I'm like, I'm not gonna re-record it, but that was ratchet. That was embarrassingly a ratchet. I apologize. But if you like my ratchet ass and Momo, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. And some of you are sitting here going, I don't know if I like Ratchet. I don't know what Ratchet is. Is it a video game character? That's my point of reference. And that's sort of the topic today. What Ratchet means is basically somebody who is low class and kind of loud and maybe even kind of proud about it. It's not a good thing, but they're just letting it happen, right? It is a close cousin, but not exactly the same thing to the term hot mess. Unfortunately, I cannot explain further on the internet because it involves the phenomenon of how race and culture overlap but aren't the same thing, and we have certain heuristic terms, heuristic meaning a decision-making shorthand, to refer to these things that apparently Americans take great offense to, or some Americans take great offense to. And then other people around the world jump on the bandwagon. But this seems to be a specifically American problem involving cultural heuristics that, at least up here in Canada, we don't have people freaking out to the degree or frequency that Americans do. There are a lot of reasons for this, but I'm prefacing this whole thing just by saying it is really frustrating. It is really exhausting to be a person who is in, a country that was created by colonialism. And so to have enough cultural similarities with the US that the things that are different become real problems and they become exceptionally frustrating. And one of those things is politeness, polite speech, appropriate speech, non-offensive speech. Increasingly, what is okay to say in Canada is not the same as what is okay to say in America. And us Canadians who use any social media service like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that, we're forced into the American politeness paradigm against our will. We have no choice. If we want to communicate on those platforms, which somebody like me, I have to for work, right? We have to submit to whatever American sensitivity is driving the conversation at a given point in time. And we don't get the memo sometimes. Now, you get into social media, you also get pockets of sensitivity, right? There's these informal subcategories of, for instance, Twitter. There's Black Twitter, there's Desi Twitter, and I have a bit of an issue for this of what do you call Twitter generally? And this is the issue, right? Like, is the rest of Twitter white Twitter? That's problematic, And this is where I got into trouble, right? There was a moment in the vice presidential debate, and this is not about politics. It's going to be nothing about a topic. It is going to be about a single moment. So don't fucking freak out on me. I don't want to see a whole bunch of tangents to what was talked about at the debate, except for the fly. The fly is love. This is about a cultural moment, and it is relevant to gaming because gaming has our own lexicons, our own language, our own slang terms that get misunderstood and misappropriated by the non-gaming world. And it's led to a lot of problems that intersect with this issue. I was trying to talk about a phenomenon that has a word in Canada that is fine in Canada, that offends a subsection of Americans who tend to overlap with a nationalist sentiment. Now, I was very careful with that. I can be more cautious on YouTube, even though people are like, oh my God, it's been 5 minutes. Get to the fucking point. This is the whole problem. Heuristics exist for a reason. Not stretching out someone's patience. Just give me the facts. Just give it to me straight. Like, quick. Too long, didn't read. It is impossible to discuss this subject this way. And so I apologize that it's taking so goddamn long. But I'm trying to not step on the button I stepped on Thursday so we can actually have a fucking conversations about, and it's impossible because there is no word. This is what I ultimately determined. The word in Canada is not acceptable in the US because of racial and political tensions in the US. So I don't know what to call this fucking thing I'm talking about. And it was basically whether or not Kamala Harris answered Mike Pence's question about court packing. I don't care about court packing. I don't care. Okay, I don't care. I don't. Holy shit, I don't care. I used to care. But after this, I don't fucking care because I've been Yankee-splained so much on court packing. I am done. And this is not important. Shut the fuck up. And in this case, it actually is important. It's just not this important. Because it probably ain't going to happen. But I dared to make a joke on Twitter. That was kind of a pointed joke. But it was still a joke. I don't know how anybody who has not completely lost their sense of humor thinks anything that begins, "Dear fellow white people," is anything but a fucking joke. In my mind, you could practically see Steve Buscemi going, "Hello, fellow kids." You know, And this is where in my mind I go, humorless fucking Americans. And I know that's wrong. I'm just voicing the frustration, okay? But dear fellow white people, when you are up in a Caribbean woman's face and she responds with, "Oh, let's talk about court packing," or any other subject responded to in that form, that is not a non-answer. That is an answer you are too white to understand. Clearly a joke. A pointed joke, but a joke. Oh, offense. Oh, outrage. Oh, I object. You're saying being white is inherently bad. Yeah, somebody actually said that to me. You're saying being white means you have less intelligence. You have less intellect. I swear to God, this is what people said. I had one person say, "You said white people have less intellect than Caribbean people." And I said, I never used the word intellect, but it was implied. No, it wasn't. And here's the thing about implications. If you think there is explicit, there is implicit. Implication comes from implicit. Meaning it's not expressly expressed. It's not clear. Check it out before you freak the fuck out. Thanks very much. And of course, when I pointed out that this, when I used the term freaking out, they freaked out more and then denied they were freaking out. So now I'm being called a racist, and I am being told I said a whole bunch of things I didn't say. There were three people I can think of that didn't like what I said, responded in a way that I considered aggressive because I come at it from a point of I recognize I benefit a lot from being white. I recognize I benefit in gaming in the particular things that I talk about. I benefit from being female. talking about certain things I do. I recognize that because I'm female in microcosm, I can talk about things that men in gaming can't. And so because of that, I'm prepared to take a couple knocks regarding, when somebody goes, fuck feminism or feminism is cancer. I'm not going to freak out because I understand the frustration that there's this belief that everybody should be equality means everyone is equal, everyone matters. And there's been this mixed message of, yeah, everyone matters, but you don't, shut the fuck up on this topic, right? I get the frustration. So I take a few hits. Stupidly, I assume that everybody was coming from that frame. Like, all right, in this case, yes, everybody who's not white gotta talk white. What does talking white mean? Exactly, that's the problem. But precisely that issue was what people took offense to. The idea that they thought I was talking about race and not talking about culture. And I kept saying, I'm not referring to race, I'm referring to culture. Do you notice I didn't say white and black? I said white and Caribbean. We'll use another word. What word would you like me to use? And this is where things just hit the shits. Okay? This is where we're up shit's creek without a paddle. Yes, I come from a country where the politest of humorless old people watch a show called Schitt's Creek. It's not an issue. We laugh about it. We're kind of amazed that it became a thing in America because they'd never call a boring network like I'm not kidding, guys. The network that airs Schitt's Creek up here is the equivalent to like NCIS and Blue Bloods, that audience, okay? And they named a show Schitt's Creek. That's how different culturally Canada is from America in that regard. We get less offended by those things. We get more offended by other things, but we get less offended by those things. We're generally, Canadians are more difficult people to offend. Generally, there are exceptions. But when I said, what word would you prefer me to use? The most common answer was American. And then I'd go, okay, we're not going to get anything here. Because we have a loop now. Somebody who doesn't recognize the inherent problems with, I'm saying white culture, they're saying American culture. You are saying that American is a synonym for white. First of all, one, no, it's not. No, it's not. A huge portion of the U.S. population, not every black person in America is the descendant of slaves, but a lot of them are. They didn't choose to be there. Their families were brought there against their will. So they are just as American as every other American, but also immigrants who get American citizenship are just as American as any other American. This is something that we handle better in Canada with our mosaic multiculturalism than America does with its melting pot multiculturalism. But then again, Velveeta and cheese is a thing. Velveeta, shells and Velveeta or something like that. Velveeta is a thing in America. We have Kraft Dinner, which is equally disgusting, but it's a powdery disgusting instead of that weird petroleum-like substance that Velveeta is. I don't get it. But that's an aside. That's a joke. That is not important. That is not something to get upset about. I am not saying you are bad if you like Velveeta. There was nothing inherent to my original comment that said white people are bad or stupid or less if they don't understand that Kamala Harris actually answered the question in a way that people more familiar with that idiom got. It is simply an indication that there are actually multiple language codes existing in America at any given time, and Canada, and any multicultural society. And the challenge is the fact that because of colonialism, we have, and I deliberately didn't use the word colonialism because I knew that was going to hit the button. People were going to roll their eyes because it's too academic. So I used the best word I could think of, which again is not a problem here because we talk like this all the time. It's a kind of joke in urban Canada where when we step on something, when we don't get something, you know, when it's like, what's boba? Oh, it's bubble tea. Sorry, I'm too white to understand these things, you know, because we have a lot of multiculturalism in this area. And so we're just like, what's shawarma? What, you know, okay, can we get gyros? Shawarma's gyros, it's the same thing. Okay, sorry, I'm too white to understand these things. We say this all the time, and it's not a horrible insult. It's not. Apparently in certain areas of the US, it's a horrible insult. I still don't know why, because people were too busy calling me a racist to explain to me why this is at all insulting. And what I ended up, because they say, just say American, just say American. Well, I'm not going to say American because that's not what I mean, because it's a problem in Canada too. It's a problem in England too. You know, I kind of like that curry is considered standard pub fare now, because that means that British culture is becoming less, it is expanding the definition of what it means to be British. And this was essentially the intent of the exercise that backfired so horribly, is that the idea of American has to become less British colonial, right? But I didn't want to say British colonial because that's not accurate, right? Because there's this whole soup now where there's certain commonalities with the Irish immigration wave and the Italian immigration wave and the Jewish immigration wave, where what I understood was all now enveloped into this idea of whiteness. Italians and Jews in America were once not considered white. Now, I won't say we because I'm not American, but now we are. But oh, that was the next wave of it. All the nationalists came out and were offended that I said fellow white people, because according to them, I'm not white. I'm not white. See, it's funnier now because you're looking right at me, and if I get any closer to the fucking camera, I fucking glow. And this is why I always joke that, like, I'm a ginger. I don't fucking belong anywhere. To some people, I'm about as white as I get, and other people, no, you're not. And that's where I went, I admit my head kind of spun, like, and I started making a joke about it. I put on Facebook, like, okay, according to Twitter, I'm not white anymore. Who wants me? So now we have, remember I said these politically correct silos in the US? So now I've got one silo where I'm very white. And then I've got another silo where I'm not white at all. So no matter who I identify with, somebody's going to use it as grounds to attack me. Because the issue wasn't even about what I said at that point, is that I dared to identify as white. They called me racist. C'est la vie. Laissez le bon temps brûler. Like, and there's a shining example. Laissez le bon temps brûler. Do you associate that with French and therefore foreign, or do you associate that with Louisiana and therefore American? Because it's both. And this is the problem. We don't have a word, because colonial doesn't work, okay? Because the British and the French and the Dutch and the Spanish went out on ships and colonized not only the Americas, but also parts of Africa. Certain common cultures went with that because it was all sort of European. There were certain things, for instance, Christianity, Kinda, but not quite. More. Hold that thought. Spread out around the globe. But then they founded this thing called America that started producing its own culture that then spit out to the rest of the world. And unfortunately, because of the racial segregation in America, for many, many years, America's cultural exports were built on the backs of Black people, but given a white flavoring. So, people like Jerry Lee Lewis, for instance, who was inspired heavily by Little Richard, but he just took enough of the, for lack of a better term, the black off of Little Richard. Still be controversial, but still get booked. Elvis Presley, the same way, right? And then you get the British invasion, which was that American borrowed from Black people rock and roll, but Britishized and spit back. And then you started getting groups like The Doors and Creedence Clearwater Revival and Aerosmith that were borrowing from rhythm and blues, but really the only difference between rhythm and blues and country and rock and roll in a lot of ways was the skin color of the performer. Now it's diversified since then, but that was the only difference at one point. We need a word for that reality. It's true in Canada. It's true in the UK. It's true in America. Because of the cross-cultural sampling that happened, no single nation owns it. The common denominator is that it is culture that was acceptable to white people, even with a clear non-white influence. If people don't like the term white culture for that, we got to come up with another term, because it's a real thing. And American, offensive elements aside, it just doesn't describe it, right? Because we have the same issue in Canada. I mean, we gave you guys Nickelback and Bieber. We're sorry. We also gave you guys Chaos and a few other acts that aren't that aren't Nickelback and Justin Bieber, right? That's not, they're not American, right? They're Canadian bands, but they fit into that zeitgeist, right? There's guys like Chaos and Cardinal Official and Chuck Lair. You guys maybe remember Chuck Lair. Guys like that. They've had some US success, but obviously different, right? We need a word to describe that. Or we can just use existing words, recognize their heuristics, nothing's a perfect fit, and not get so goddamn offended. Your choice. I don't care. I just want to know what I can say so I can point out, hey, people saying she didn't answer the question. That's expressed as an intentional thing. Not she answered the question in a way that was not clear to the average or the majority of people watching. That would have been accurate. But to say just flat out she didn't answer the question, oh no, she did. Oh no. Anybody with any familiarity, when a Caribbean woman, and people who are saying she's Indian, so she's not Caribbean culturally, doesn't understand the unique nature of what a Caribbean ancestry is. Caribbeans are unique in you know, the Black cultural mosaic, in that you had the forced migration of Black people, the slave trade, but then you had Indian people who were Commonwealth servants entering into indentured servitude contracts, willingly at first, but then they got there and discovered there were loopholes in them, which means they couldn't break them. So it was essentially a different form of slavery, only they kind of signed up. And everybody, Asian, South Asian, former African, anybody who wasn't white got lumped in together in a lot of ways. And that's where the Caribbean culture, which is, Jamaica, Trinidad, all these places, even places like Guyana, it's a unique background that way. So saying Kamala Harris is less Caribbean because she's Indian, part Indian, like that's not so. It's the same thing with Sean Paul. Sean Paul has ancestry from all over the place. It's the Caribbean. That's how it works. And apparently Mexico has similar things. Shout out to Eileen for that bit of knowledge. But like, this is ridiculous. You're trying to slice a person up instead of just listening. That no, to her, in her mind, she was answering the question. But people didn't hear it as an answer. And this is significant. This is of interest beyond that one debate. And that's why I'm bringing it into gaming. Because we use language in a specific way, in a way that is specific to gaming. Ganking, tanking, DPS, DOT, all these terms. Other people, my husband all the time is like, what does that mean? I mentioned, the Guybrush Threepwood paradox earlier today, and he was like, what? I'm like, oh man. So between us gamers, we say the Guybrush Threepwood paradox, 3 words, conveys something it took me about 3 minutes to explain. And the reason this video is going on 28 minutes is because I had to explain a whole bunch of concepts that don't have a heuristic, a term, like ratchet, like the Guybrush Threepwood paradox, that is commonly understood. It takes a very, very long time. The reason my videos are so long is I end up existing in this area of we really don't have a term for this. So it's going to take me a while to explain it. It's important in gaming because we do speak in a collection of idioms. I say it's the Darmok episode of Star Trek The Next Generation a lot. And then if somebody doesn't get that reference, you have to ironically explain it to them, right? Because we're speaking in metaphors, and that's why I started with the term ratchet. Ratchet to a gamer means a pithy little Lombax with a robot sidekick, right? Though I maintain that Ratchet is actually the sidekick. Clank is... But we can fight later about that. Ratchet means one thing in one context, another thing in another context. And it's more productive on an ongoing basis to point out that both definitions have their use. Both uses of the word have their use instead of fighting over which one's correct. And unfortunately, there are a lot of politicized actors out there who don't want those discussions to be had because they become less powerful when they have less control over the language we use to communicate. And that is what I think happened to me. People just dogpiled, first of all, just to be able to be terribly anti-Semitic because it was like, do 300 people really need to go, are you a Jew? Jew, you're a Jew, you're not right. Like, seriously? A half dozen weren't enough? for you guys? Like, you all had to tell me I'm a Jew? Like, I'm Canadian too. I'm a ginger. I'm a bunch of things. Like, one person varied it up and said I'm a postmenopausal woman, which one isn't fucking true yet. Will be someday, but not now. But yeah, one guy actually told me I was a postmenopausal woman, so I was hysterical that my judgment was clouded. But I was racist. And that was a shining example of, I said, baseline check. Okay, self-awareness check here. Are you aware that what you just said was extremely sexist? He wouldn't agree to it. You know what? If he'd agree to it, awesome. At least he's aware. But if he's not going to admit to that, we can't get anywhere. Another guy kept saying the proof of Jews not being white is that Jews refer to non-Jews as Gentiles or Goyim. And so I said, okay, based on that logic, are Mormons not white? Because they refer to non-Mormons in places as Gentiles. I understand that that's relaxed some, but if like when I did my talk on Twilight and Mormonism at a Mormon conference to a room full of Mormons, when I said I'm Jewish, like I'm loving this because this is, I get to be the Gentile in this room. The whole room laughed, So I asked a couple of guys, are Mormons not white? They wouldn't answer the question. So I know they're in bad faith. They're not willing to have a conversation. Another guy actually said I was a little upset that these guys thought I was agreeing with them in this regard in any way. We came to an understanding. He was actually the guy that made me recognize that the issue is the thing I'm trying to talk about here just has no term. That's something we can do something about. But there are, and this is when people say keep politics out of gaming. This is what they mean, right? These partisan bombardments, and I get accused of both sidesism when I say both sides do it. But this is a shining example of how the political radicals on both sides, the loud foaming at the mouth freaks on social media, don't allow us to solve problems in gaming. Because I don't even know if I'm fucking white anymore. Because if I don't identify as white, then according to left-wing almost everybody, but especially the radicals, I'm not checking my white privilege. But if I identify as white and speak as part of the in-group, dear fellow white people, the right-wing extreme goes, shut up, Jew, you're not white. Don't speak to us as if you're one of us. I can't speak. I can't make a point because I can't even define who I am for the purposes of this fucking conversation. And it ain't just me. It's every person. Because let's face it, let's change my gender, okay? Let's change one thing about me. I'm white. I'm not white. I'm male. Let's make myself a male Christian, okay? Character palette swap, Saints Row, plastic surgeon, boom. Now I'm a male Christian. I can eat bacon and shellfish again. Joke. But now, to the left, I'm the great oppressor, right? I am allowed to have an opinion on nothing because my kind have spoken too much already. Thank you very much. Okay, I submit to that. The extreme right comes in and goes, soy boy cuck. You can't win. Nobody can win, right? Because it's like self-explanatory that any other type of person has, you take away white skin, oh Lord. Because again, then we get into that exact thing that I was talking about. People who are not raised in this tradition that does not have a name because for so long it was so dominant, it didn't need a name. It was just the culture. Anybody who is not fluent in that cultural ease is at a disadvantage. And I have seen utterly brilliant black and brown and even Asian people, which blows me away. I'm not talking Asia. I'm talking, like I said in Boss Fight, like Asian Canadians and Asian Americans. They are totally shouted down because they just don't have the language that makes the dominant culture comfortable. And it's incredibly different. Like, I go into college lectures, more on this tomorrow, but I go into college lectures and I can speak to them. But I recognize these poor kids because there's very few white faces in these schools. They're going to go in and they're speaking Torontoese, right? Meaning you don't pronounce the second T in Toronto. It's not Toronto, it's Toronto. That's the way we talk. Fight me. No, just kidding. We're Canadian. We don't fight, except in hockey. That's why you got to avoid fighting in Canada, because the hockey game breaks. Joke. But they're going to go and try to get a job in the industry, and they are going to get the shit smacked out of them because they don't speak the language. And there's nothing I can do about it. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it, because I'm still getting the shit smacked out of me in this industry for not having the language. And that just doesn't hurt the people trying to get into the industry. That hurts the industry. It hurts an industry that spans the globe. And that should be a strength, that we're not locked into media markets. Everyone should have equality of opportunity. Go make your game. That should be a strength of gaming. And we're faltering on that because of fucking linguistics. It's bullshit. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. Okay. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.